The phone rang at 4 p.m. I smiled as I reached for it, my heart already soft with excitement. I just wanted to ask my son one simple thing. When is the wedding? On the other end, a pause. Then Lena's voice. Smooth, polished, cruel. "Oh, we got married yesterday," she said. "We only invited special people." The world stopped. For 3 seconds, even the air felt too heavy to breathe. Before we start, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. I stood in my living room, the room I'd paid for. Furnished, cleaned for years, holding the phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Across the line I heard laughter, the faint clinking of glasses. Celebration. Then silence, the kind that echoes through your bones. I whispered, "Yesterday." No answer, only the sound of Max clearing his throat before he hung up. I sank into the armchair I had bought for them when they first moved out. The scent of old fabric, mixed with the taste of betrayal. On the coffee table lay the wedding catalog I'd kept for months, filled with sticky notes and circles in blue pen. Every page now mocked me. For years, I'd been the invisible engine of their lives. Rent, groceries, doctor bills, even the down payment for their sofa. When they had nothing, I opened my savings and said, "Take what you need." I believed generosity could build love. I was wrong. The clock on the wall ticked sharp, metallic, merciless. Each second whispered, "Not special, not special, not special." I stood up and opened the closet. There it was, the pale pink dress I had bought for the wedding, still wrapped in plastic, untouched, hopeful. Next to it, a white box with new shoes, and a small envelope with a card that said, "To Max and Lena, with love, Mom." I had imagined handing it to them, smiling through tears. Now it was just another relic of my foolishness. I sat on the edge of the bed, the room dim, the air heavy. Outside, children were laughing on the street, the sound of a world that still believed in innocence. Inside, I felt like the light had been turned off forever. I picked up the photo frame from my nightstand. Max at 6 years old, chocolate on his face, his tiny arms around my neck. He had once whispered, "Mom, you're my favorite person." What happened to that boy? Where did he go? My throat tightened. I pressed the frame against my chest and cried without sound, the kind of crying that shakes the body but never leaves the lips. Hours later, the phone buzzed again. A notification, a tag on social media. He hesitated, then opened it. The photo filled the screen. Lena in a lace wedding gown, Max in a gray suit, her parents beside them, smiling proudly. Caption, "The most special day with our most special people." Something inside me shattered. Slow and clean. Not a scream, not a sob, just the quiet collapse of everything I'd believed in. I walked to the mirror. My reflection looked like a stranger, a woman who had mistaken love for servitude, motherhood for sacrifice. The fine lines around my mouth had deepened into something permanent. The eyes staring back at me were no longer soft. They were glass, catching light, but giving none back. I remembered every check I'd written, every birthday gift, every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. I whispered to the mirror, "I made you both comfortable, and you made me disposable." I wiped my tears with the sleeve of my cardigan and looked around my quiet house. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. But beneath those sounds was another rhythm, a heartbeat that wasn't weak anymore. I brewed coffee, black and strong, and sat at the kitchen table. Outside, the sky was changing. Morning was close. I watched the first light stretch across the window like a promise. On the counter sat a stack of unopened bank statements. They'd been there for months, reminders of every automatic transfer I made for their comfort. I picked one up, tore the envelope open, and looked at the balance, lower than ever. A quiet laugh escaped my lips, brittle, almost hysterical. How fitting, I thought, that the woman who financed everyone's happiness couldn't afford her own peace. I turned off the phone, unplugged it, and placed it face down. For the first time, I didn't care if Max called. I didn't care if Lena posted another photo. The light in the kitchen grew brighter. I traced my finger over the table's wooden surface, the same table where I had wrapped gifts for them. Written checks. Prayed for their future. Now, it would witness something else. I reached for a pen. My hand trembled, but my resolve did not. I began to write a list. Rent, furniture, food, electricity, gifts, lies. Each word like a hammer, blow. Each line a step away from the woman I used to be. When I finished, I drew a single straight line beneath the last word and whispered, "Enough." The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Not empty, but expectant. I stood up, folded the list, and placed it on the stack of bills. Then I walked to the window. Outside, the sun broke through the gray clouds, its light cutting through the glass like a blade of gold. Somewhere deep inside me, something shifted, a small, fierce spark. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like awakening. The next afternoon I baked a lemon loaf and carried it to their apartment, because that is what mothers do when words have become dangerous. Lena opened the door a crack, eyes traveling from the cake box to my shoes as if scanning a package at the post office. "Next time, call first," she said, smiling with only half her mouth. I held up the loaf, pretending not to hear the steel. "It's still warm," I said. "I thought we could have tea." She hesitated, then stepped back. Letting me into a living room I recognized more than she ever would. I had chosen the couch fabric, the rug pattern, even the small brass lamp glowing in the corner. But everything felt colder inside their walls than it had in my store catalog. Max was at the table with his laptop, head down, the screen reflecting in his glasses like two small mirrors. "Hi, Mom," he said without turning. I placed the cake on the counter and washed my hands at the sink I had helped them install. Lena brought out plates, each movement polite and precise. The choreography of someone who wants to get through a scene without improvisation. We ate in silence. The lemon was sweet, the glaze a little too thick, and no one told me it was good. Somewhere in the building, a baby cried, and a dog barked, and it all felt more alive than the three of us. Lena's phone buzzed and she angled it away, thumb dancing fast. A shadow of a smile crossed her face, then vanished. Max coughed, then pretended to read an email that clearly wasn't there. "I saw the photos," I said gently, and a bird hit the window inside my chest. "Congratulations." Max nodded, like an employee receiving a memo. "It was a small thing," Lena said. "Very intimate." I looked at the mantel, where a framed picture of the ceremony already sat. Her parents pressed close to the couple, as if to keep out a draft. I didn't exist there, not even as a mistake. "I brought the receipt for the couch," I said, pulling a folded paper from my purse before I could stop myself. "I can claim the warranty, if anything breaks." Lena's eyes flickered, measuring what claim meant. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll handle adult things." Max shifted in his chair, the movement of a boy trying not to take sides, and failing. I put the paper away and tried to swallow the taste of metal gathering at the back of my tongue. On the fridge hung a magnet that said, "Home is where we choose each other." It was new. I wondered who had chosen it, and who needed the reminder. Lena stood, stacking plates before I could touch them, as if my fingerprints might leave oil on their future. She rinsed them with quick, efficient hands and set them in the rack-like pieces on a chessboard. Without looking at me, she said, "Max has a meeting soon. We need to get ready." "I'll go," I said, rising. "I just wanted to see you both." Max finally came to the door and hugged me. A careful hug, more posture than touch. "Thanks for the cake," he said to the floor. In the hallway, a woman passed carrying a bouquet. "Congratulations," she told Lena, who lit up so bright. I almost believed I had dreamed the cold. Then the woman glanced at me and asked, kindly, "And you're the groom's?" "The cleaner," Lena said lightly, then laughed. A quick little bird of a laugh that could be mistaken for a joke if you wanted to keep breathing. I smiled too, because a lifetime of manners is a long rope to cut. The elevator door slid open with a soft sigh that sounded exactly like giving up. Back home, the emptiness had multiplied. I set my purse down, and it made too loud a sound on the table, like a gavel. I cut a slice of the second loaf I'd made, and could not taste it. The phone lit up with a message from Max. "Thanks for stopping by. We're really busy this month. Maybe check before visiting next time." A second message followed, as if that one needed a shield. "Love you." I stared until the words blurred, then wiped my eyes with the heel of my hand, as if erasing chalk. Night came early, as if someone had dragged the sky down by hand. I opened the box in my closet and took out the shoes I had bought for the wedding, the ones that promised to be kind to old knees. I set them on the floor and turned off the light and stood in the dark, listening to the shape of my own breathing. The next morning I went to the market and ran into Mrs. Brabescride. "Vogel from church. Your boy looked so handsome," she said, touching my arm with soft pity. "We saw the photos. I hope you're not upset." "I'm fine," I said, and the lie felt like a dress I hadn't tailored right. She nodded, relieved, and told me about the choir's new hymn while I picked oranges I didn't need. On the way home I threw them away, one by one, into the bin behind the pharmacy, watching each bright globe drop without a sound. I started noticing the small things I'd missed. Max had changed his email password and no longer asked me to help reset it. Lena had replaced the loose, friendly texts with calendar links. There were new phrases in their voices, the tiny knives of modern distance. "We need boundaries. We're building our own unit." I tried to accept it the way you accept rain, by pretending you won't always be wet. But then, one evening, Max called while Lena was out. "Mom, about the apartment," he said, choosing his words like stones to step on. "What about it?" I asked, though my body already knew. He cleared his throat, in the old way. "That used to mean I broke a window with my friends. This is uncomfortable," he said, which meant Lena wants something. "Just say it. She thinks it's better if all the monthly stuff goes through me now," he said, "like rent and, any support for clarity." I looked at the list on my table from the day before and felt the pen marks warm under my palms. "Clarity," I repeated. I could hear his relief, the sigh of a man who had stepped aside to let someone else drive his life. "Right," he said. "So I'll send you some forms. Just routine. Forms for what? Power of attorney things. Banking convenience," he said quickly. "Lena's mom has it with her, so she suggested." "What does her mother have to do with my accounts?" Silence. Then a clumsy pivot. "It just makes emergencies easier. If we need to cover rent and can't reach you." I let the quiet grow tall between us, until he could feel its shadow. "I'll think about it," I said, and he said, "Thank you," like a child allowed another half hour of cartoons. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen without moving. The refrigerator hummed its old song, but I heard a new note inside it, a low warning. Later that week, I returned to their building with a bag of groceries I'd told myself they needed. I pressed the bell and waited, then tried the handle out of habit. It turned. Inside, music drifted from the bedroom, and the hallway smelled of new perfume. I took one step into the kitchen, then froze as voices floated from the cracked door. Lena's laugh, then her whisper, bright and satisfied. "Don't worry. Once she signs, everything's smooth. Her bank is ancient." "Are you sure she will?" Max asked, smaller in his own home than I had ever heard him. "She always does," Lena said. "She just needs the right story." Their laughter braided in the air, and I felt the braid tighten around my throat. I backed away, set the groceries on the counter with the quiet reverence of a funeral offering, and left without closing the door fully. In the elevator mirror, my face looked calm, composed, like a woman who had resolved to do nothing dramatic. The doors slid shut, and my reflection split down the middle. Outside, evening had gathered in the parking lot, and streetlights were just starting to bloom. I stood by the curb and watched the windows light up one by one, each square a small stage where other people were chosen. In my pocket, my keys pressed into my palm like teeth. At home, I opened the drawer where I kept my husband's old paperwork, the leather folder I hadn't touched since the funeral. I laid it on the table and undid the strap, slow as opening a wound that had never truly healed. The folder fell open to a line of my name next to his in black ink, and something bright sparked in the dark. That night, the rain came down like it wanted to erase the world. I sat at the kitchen table, with the folder open in front of me, the letterhead glowing pale under the lamp. My husband's old lawyer, Klein and Partners, the name I had almost forgotten. At the bottom of the document, a single line in his handwriting. All family assets are to remain under the direct discretion of Renate Klein, unless the descendants maintain integrity and respect. Integrity and respect. The words looked simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights and the memory of a man who once promised me that our kindness would be rewarded. I smiled at the irony. By morning, the rain had stopped. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the light crawl across the street like a cautious animal. My phone buzzed again, Max. I let it ring. When it stopped, a message followed. "We really need those forms today." I typed back only 2 words. "Not ready." Then I powered off the phone and let the silence wrap around me like armor. But silence never lasts long in a family built on taking. At noon, the doorbell rang. Through the glass, I saw Lena. Perfect hair, perfect coat, perfect smile. She held a bouquet of lilies and the same brown envelope I'd seen in my dreams. "Mom," she said, soft, rehearsed. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. The house smelled of coffee and damp paper. Lena's perfume slithered through it, trying to overwrite everything I owned. She set the flowers down as if claiming territory. "We feel terrible," she began, "about the misunderstanding with the wedding. It was rushed. We didn't mean to hurt you." Her voice was honey over glass shards. I nodded, letting her speak. Behind her words, I could hear the real rhythm, a transaction waiting to happen. She placed the envelope on the table. "Just a small formality," she said, "so we can manage things properly if something happens. You know how fragile things can be at your age." I almost laughed. She didn't realize how many storms I'd survived before she was even born. But I said nothing. I simply smiled, the way quiet women have smiled through centuries of betrayal. I picked up the envelope, pretending to read the top line, and said, "Do you have a pen?" Lena brightened instantly. "Of course." She handed me hers. Eager, relieved. I uncapped it, looked at the blank space for my signature, and then paused. "Actually," I said softly, "let's make some tea first." She nodded, following me into the kitchen, already certain she'd won. While the kettle boiled, I turned my back to her and reached for the small digital recorder I kept by the phone, a habit from my years in community work. I clicked it on. Its tiny red light blinked like a heartbeat. We sat at the table. Steam rose between us like a curtain. I let her talk about how busy Max was, how stressful life had been, how lucky they were to have my help. Every word carved itself into the recorder's memory. Then I asked, as casually as I could, "So, if I sign this, everything will go through you." "Just temporarily," she said. "It's the best way to keep things smooth." Her smile was a blade. I nodded, eyes low. When she reached for the pen again, I gently pushed the papers back toward her. "I'm not sure I can sign today," I said. "I'd like my lawyer to look at it first." Her expression cracked. "What lawyer?" I met her eyes for the first time. "My husband's, Klein, Partners." A flicker, just a second of panic before the mask returned. "Oh, that's outdated," she said quickly. "No need to involve." But I was already standing. "Outdated," I said. "So is honesty, it seems." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She stood, muttering excuses, gathering her things too quickly. The bouquet tipped over, scattering lilies across the table, their yellow pollen staining the white tablecloth like a warning. As she walked to the door, I picked up one fallen flower and held it out. "For decoration," I said softly. "You like things to look perfect." She didn't take it. When the door closed, I turned off the recorder. The silence that followed felt alive, almost electric. I sat back down and played the last 10 seconds. Her voice, sweet and careless, it filled the room. It's the best way to keep things smooth. We'll have access to everything. Perfect. I copied the file to a flash drive and slid it into the folder with my husband's documents. The pen lay where she'd left it, gold, elegant, engraved with her company's logo. I rolled it between my fingers and whispered, "Only special people." Outside, thunder rumbled again. Though the sky was clear, I looked up at the window and saw my reflection, the quiet smile of a woman beginning to wake up. The night after Lena's visit, I didn't sleep. The walls pulsed with memory. Every clock ticked louder than the one before, and the air carried the faint smell of lilies I'd thrown into the trash. I sat at the table in my robe, staring at the folder where the recording rested, proof of how little love had ever mattered. At 2 a.m., I poured myself a glass of water. The reflection in it trembled like someone I no longer recognized. When I raised it to my lips, my hand shook. It wasn't age. It was disbelief that I'd allowed them to hollow me out for so long. I moved through the house, touching objects as if to confirm they were still mine. The faded curtains I'd sewn, the chair my husband used to read in, the photo of Max as a child, holding a paper boat. The child in the frame had loved me once. The man he became had sold that love for comfort. When the first gray light seeped through the window, I felt the weight of exhaustion settle into my bones. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears come slow, soundless, deliberate. They weren't weak anymore. They burned, carving new shapes into my face. Each drop whispered a truth I'd avoided, that my sacrifices had turned into chains. The phone rang around 8 brace. I didn't answer. It rang again, and again, until the machine caught it. Max's voice spilled through the speaker, calm, rehearsed. "Mom, Lena said you seemed upset yesterday. Let's not make things complicated. Just sign the forms, and everything will go back to normal." Normal. A word that once meant Sunday dinners and laughter. Now it meant silence, obedience. Eracher. I stared at the machine until it stopped blinking, then unplugged it from the wall. The click sounded like closing a coffin. For the rest of the morning, I wandered the house like a ghost. The sunlight felt foreign, the rooms smaller. I caught myself whispering to my late husband, "You'd know what to do, wouldn't you?" But even in memory, he stayed silent, perhaps letting me learn the lesson he'd already paid for. By noon, I found myself in the kitchen, staring at the notebook I'd used to balance their bills. Pages and pages of numbers. Each one a fragment of devotion. Rent, utilities, gifts. Every line proof of how I'd built their comfort from my own emptiness. I tore the pages out one by one and fed them into the sink, turned on the faucet, watched the ink bleed into the drain like a confession. When the last page vanished, I exhaled for the first time in years. At 3 p.m., there was another knock on the door, the kind that announces confidence rather than asks permission. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a gray suit, clean-cut. Un familiar. He held an envelope embossed with the words Brighton Financial Group. "Mrs. Klein," he asked when I opened the door halfway. "I'm here to verify some signatures related to your estate. Mr. and Mrs. Adler said you'd be expecting me." I smiled, polite and cold. "They shouldn't speak for me," I said, "and I haven't signed a thing." His eyebrows twitched. "Would you like to schedule, eh?" "No," I said. "I'd like you to leave." He hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. Have a good day." As he walked down the path, I saw his car window roll down, his phone glinting in the light. He was calling someone. I didn't need to guess who. I locked the door, double-bolted it, and leaned against it until my breathing steadied. The world had turned into a play I hadn't auditioned for, and everyone else seemed to know the script. But now I had something they didn't, truth, captured on tape. Still, when night returned, the loneliness pressed harder than the anger. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights blur in the rain. The world outside moved on, cars sliding past, like fragments of another life. Inside, the clock struck 10, and the sound filled the room like a question. What now? I picked up my husband's fountain pen, the one that had signed every loan and mortgage decades ago. The ink had dried, but I liked the weight of it in my hand. It reminded me that even paper carries memory, that every signature is a declaration of belief. I had believed too easily. In the quiet, I whispered to the dark, "They think they've won. But this is just the beginning." The words startled me not for what they meant, but for how calm they sounded. There was no trembling, no fear, only certainty. I stood, walked to the mirror, and met my reflection. My eyes were swollen, but alive, the kind of alive that hurts. Because it's new. Tomorrow, I said to her, we start counting. Morning light stretched across the kitchen table, like a ledger waiting to be filled. The rain had washed the world clean, but inside the house, dust still carried the ghosts of every favor I'd ever given. I set down my tea and opened a new notebook. The first page smelled of paper and promise. I wrote the title slowly, pressing hard. What I owe myself. Then I began the audit. Rent, $500 a month for 36 months. $18,000. Groceries, roughly $120 weekly. When they said they couldn't afford organic food, $18,720. Furniture, the sofa they argued about in the store, $2,200. Utilities, 3 winter bills I quietly covered, $870. Wedding gift, they never received, $1,000 in cash, still in an envelope. Total, $40,790. The number sat there, glaring. It was larger than my first car, larger than my retirement plan, larger than the space left inside me for hope. But it was honest, something no one in my family had given me in years. I closed my eyes and remembered every transfer, every thanks. Mom, followed by silence. The smell of their empty apartment when I helped them move in. The look on Max's face when I handed him keys to comfort. I used to think love meant giving without counting. Now I realized giving without memory was self-erasure. I tore a page from the notebook, wrote $40,790 stolen from Faith, and pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. Let it be a warning label for sentiment. The phone rang. Again, I let it echo through the room before answering. Mom, Max said. His tone was syrup over stone. Can we talk about the paperwork? Lena's really worried. I bet she is, I said. He sighed, the sound of a man exhausted by decency. We just want things to be easy. Easy for whom? I asked. Come on, Mom, he said, laughing softly. You're making it sound like we're stealing from you. Then you shouldn't be nervous, I said, and hung up. I took the notebook, tucked it into my bag, and stepped outside for the first time in days. The sun felt strange on my skin, too honest, too revealing. At the corner, a small cafe had just opened, the smell of coffee and burnt sugar spilling onto the street. I ordered one espresso and sat by the window, pretending the world hadn't betrayed me. Through the glass, I saw a young couple holding hands, arguing over rent and groceries and dreams. They reminded me of us. Once the version of love that hadn't yet learned about debt. I wanted to warn them. Don't build a home with borrowed loyalty. When I got home, a letter waited in the mailbox. From Brighton Financial Group. Subject, confirmation of power of attorney transfer. My pulse quickened. I tore it open, blank spaces for signatures. My name typed neatly at the bottom. They'd tried again. They were relentless. I stared at the form for a long time, then smiled. Their greed had become predictable, and predictability was weakness. I fetched my husband's fountain pen, filled it with fresh ink, and signed, but not on their lines. I wrote across the page in wide, elegant strokes. Access revoked. Pending legal review. Then I scanned the form and sent it directly to Klein & Partners with a short note. They've moved from persuasion to forgery. Prepare for defense. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a reply from the firm's senior partner. Ms. Hartman, we'll take care of this. Don't speak to them again without counsel. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling. For the first time, the air in the house felt breathable. The silence no longer pressed. It expanded. That evening, I cooked for myself a single portion of soup, fresh bread. I set one place at the table and lit a candle. No apologies. No leftovers. Just me. I ate slowly, tasting everything. Every spoonful, a small act of rebellion against invisibility. When I finished, I washed the dishes and poured a final cup of tea, the steam curling like memory. I took out the notebook again and wrote a new line beneath the numbers. Debt repaid to myself. Then I added a second note. Smaller. Sharper. Next. Stop the transfer. As I closed the book, headlights swept across the window. A car idled outside my gate, unfamiliar. Silent. A silhouette inside. Watching. My heartbeat rose. But I didn't move. I stood at the curtain, unseen, until the engine finally started and the car rolled away into the night. Not fear confirmation. They knew I wasn't playing along anymore. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, not from worry, but from clarity. The world outside my window was pale and sharp, the kind of morning that tells you it's time to move. I dressed with the precision of someone preparing for a quiet war. A navy coat, black gloves, the same heels I'd worn to my husband's funeral. They clicked on the pavement, like punctuation marks. The bank sat on the corner of Main Street. Small, familiar, harmless looking. Until today. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed above polite smiles. The young teller, Rebecca, recognized me immediately. Mrs. Klein, she said, here to renew your automatic transfers. Quite the opposite, I answered. She blinked, uncertain, then led me to a private desk. The monitor reflected both our faces, mine steady, hers confused. I need to cancel every recurring payment to Max and Lena Adler, I said. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. Are you sure? Ma'am, you've had those transfers for 3 years. I interrupted. Yes, I remember every cent. She hesitated, waiting for a reason. I gave her one that wasn't a lie. Let's just say the investment didn't yield the return I expected. Her eyes softened, maybe with pity, maybe with understanding. Within minutes, she clicked, confirm. A quiet tone signaled the cancellation. Just like that, a chapter of servitude closed. I asked for a printed statement, watched the machine whir, and folded the paper carefully into my purse. For once, I wasn't shaking. As I stepped outside, the sunlight felt different, not warm, but earned. I walked past shop windows reflecting a woman I almost didn't recognize. Her shoulders straighter, her chin higher. Maybe this was what freedom looked like. Small, firm, and silent. My phone buzzed in my bag. Max. Then again. Then Lena. I ignored both. At home, I turned on the radio. Jazz. The kind my husband used to hum while fixing the fence. I brewed coffee and let the music fill the house. Each note pushing out the old ghosts. Halfway through the second cup, the phone rang again, louder this time. As if they could sense my peace. I answered. Mom? Max's voice was sharp with panic. The rent didn't go through. The landlord just called. Did you forget? No, I said. Then what happened? I stopped paying. Silence. A silence that screamed. Are you serious? He said finally. Very. Mom. Lena's upset. We've been counting on that. I know. You've been counting on me for everything. He started to argue. Words tumbling over each other, stress. Responsibility. Misunderstanding, but I was already somewhere else. Inside my own calm. When he paused for breath, I said quietly, You told me once I wasn't special enough to be invited. Now you'll learn what being ordinary feels like. Mom. I hung up. The phone rang again, and again, until it stopped. Then came a text from Lena. You'll regret this. Don't make things ugly. I smiled. Ugly had been my reality for years. They were just noticing the mess now. I turned off the phone, slipped the statement from my purse, and pinned it to the fridge beside the old photo of Max as a child. The boy who once gave me dandelions was gone. The man he became deserved paperwork. Outside, clouds gathered, thick and heavy. The wind pushed against the windows like it wanted in. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink and stood there listening to the wind, to the creak of the house, to the quiet confidence growing inside my chest. Then came the knock. 3 sharp hits against the door. I didn't need to check who it was. Only people who owe explanations knock that hard. I opened it anyway. Lena stood there, hair perfect, eyes wild. "You can't just stop sending money," she said. "I can," I said. "It's cruel. Max's job is temporary. We're struggling." I was struggling too. I said. "You just didn't notice." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You don't want this to turn into something legal. Neither do you," I said, smiling. She blinked, confused by my calm. "Excuse me. Forgery," I said softly. "Power of attorney documents sent without consent. Your signature is on one of them. You should be very careful what turns legal." For the first time since I'd known her, she stepped back. "We didn't mean." "I'm sure you didn't," I said. "Goodbye, Lena." The door clicked shut between us. I leaned against it, listening to her footsteps retreat. For once, her heels sounded smaller than mine. That night, the sky broke open again. Thunder, rolling, like applause. I opened the notebook on my table and added one new line. Control restored. Then I underlined it. Once, hard enough to tear the paper. By Monday, the silence was louder than the phone ever had been. No texts, no visits, no guilt-masked apologies. Just quiet, the kind that makes you wonder if peace is supposed to hurt this much at first. I woke early, made oatmeal, opened the blinds, and watched the neighborhood come alive. Children ran to the bus stop. A dog barked. Normal life kept happening, even as mine rearranged itself. I thought of Max, where he might be right now. Did he notice the rent overdue notice pinned to their door? Did he realize yet that love wasn't a bank account? By afternoon, the phone finally rang. I let it go 3 times before I answered. "Mom," Lena's voice, sharp and desperate. "We just got a call from the landlord. He's threatening eviction." "You forgot the transfer again." "I didn't forget," I said, pouring myself tea. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's not my responsibility anymore." She inhaled sharply, as if my calmness was an act of violence. "Max lost his temp job. I'm between clients. We have nothing right now. You can't just—" I set the cup down gently, the porcelain ringing like a bell. "Lena," I said, "for 3 years, I was your safety net. You burned it. Now you're falling." Her tone changed from panic to manipulation. The music she played best. "Please, Renate. You're a mother. You know what it's like to want to protect your family." "I do," I said. "That's why I'm protecting myself." She went quiet. Then, in a smaller voice, "Max is embarrassed. He didn't want to call. But he's worried. Worried about me. About the money," she said, not catching the irony. I laughed, softly, the kind of laugh that used to belong to a younger, lighter woman. "Tell him I'm fine," I said, and hung up. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Max. "Mom," he said. His voice cracked on the second word. "Lena told me you said you're done helping. Please tell me that's not true." "It's true." "Why now?" "Because I finally realized I was the only one trying to build a family." He exhaled hard, the sound of guilt wrestling with habit. "Look, can we talk? Face to face." "About what?" "You made your choices. You're being dramatic." The word snapped something inside me. "I was dramatic when I held you as a baby and promised I'd never let you go hungry," I said. "I was dramatic when I sold your father's watch to pay your tuition. But this is called remembering who I am." "Mom, please," he whispered. "Tell Lena I said something for her." I replied. "What?" "Tell her I only help special people." Then I hung up. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. This time it was alive. It hummed like electricity. For the first time, I felt the balance shift. Evening fell early, bruised clouds pressing low against the sky. I stood by the window with the lights off, watching the street. A car pulled up outside their apartment building. 2 men stepped out, carried a box of furniture down to the curb. The landlord. So it had begun. I should have felt guilt. But instead, There was a strange calm, the kind that comes when justice stops needing permission. I made dinner soup, toast, the basics. While I ate, the phone buzzed again and again, until finally I picked it up. A new number. "You'll regret this." A voice hissed. "You're ruining your own family." I didn't recognize it, but I knew who had sent it. Lena's way of hiding, behind borrowed threats. I blocked the number, set the phone face down, and went to the porch. The air smelled of wet concrete and thunder. Across the street, the world looked washed clean, except for the pieces of me still drying out. I thought of my husband's last words in the hospital. "Don't let them make you small." I'd failed him for years, but tonight, I finally understood what he meant. The wind picked up, scattering the mail that had fallen through the slot. Among the bills and flyers, one envelope stood out thick. "Stamped urgent. Legal notice." I tore it open. Inside was a single-page statement of my assets, and at the bottom, a forged signature. Mine. They hadn't just taken from me. They'd started pretending to be me. I felt the tremor in my hand return not from fear, but fury. The kind of quiet fury that builds storms. I placed the letter flat on the table, smoothed its edges, and turned on the lamp. Its light fell over the notebook, the pen, and the empty page waiting for the next line. I wrote, "Fraud confirmed," evidence growing, then underlined it twice. By Thursday, the air itself felt like warning. The morning light came late and left early, and even the birds outside seemed hesitant to speak. I knew something was coming, the way you know a storm is about to break even before the first drop hits the ground. It arrived at 6:17 p.m. 3 knocks, firm and rapid, like punctuation marks in a threat. When I opened the door, they were there, Max and Lena, side by side, a united front built on panic. Lena looked immaculate, of course perfect makeup, coat pressed, the kind of calm that belongs only to people rehearsing a lie. Max, on the other hand, looked like a boy caught with stolen candy. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he started, "we need to talk." I stepped aside. "You always do when you need something." They entered without waiting for permission. Lena dropped her purse onto the couch, her gaze scanning the room as if checking how much of it could still be taken. I closed the door behind them, the sound echoing like the start of a trial. "We just came from the bank," she said. Her tone clipped. "They said, you revoked access to the joint account." "I didn't revoke it," I said. "I reclaimed it." Her smile was small, controlled. "This isn't how families work, Renate. Families." I laughed softly. "You mean the kind that marry in secret and forge signatures?" Max flinched. "Mom, stop." "No, Max, you stop. Stop defending what you know is wrong." He looked up then, eyes wet and tired. "You don't understand what it's like. Trying to build a life. Dealing with bills. Trying to stay afloat." "I do," I said. "That's why I built one for you. And you sank it." Lena folded her arms. "We're not here to fight. We just want to fix this before it gets ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. "You made sure of that." I walked to the table, lifted the folder with the forged letter, and placed it between us. "Do you recognize this?" Lena didn't blink. "I don't know what that is." "Then you forged a stranger's name very well," I said. Max swallowed. "Lena, don't look at me," she said quickly. "Maybe the bank made a mistake." "Then why does it have your initials on the fax confirmation?" For a moment, no one spoke. The clock ticked like a metronome, counting down to collapse. Finally, Max whispered, "Lena, tell me you didn't?" Her eyes darted toward him, then back to me, that split-second hesitation of a liar, calculating the cost of truth. "It was just paperwork," she said. "Everyone does it." She wasn't going to live forever. The sentence landed like a slap. Even Max's breath caught. I looked at her for a long, terrible second. "You just buried your own future in that sentence," I said quietly. I opened the folder, pressed play on my phone, and let the recording play her voice from that afternoon. Smooth and unmistakable. It's the best way to keep things smooth. "We'll have access to everything." Her face drained of color. You recorded me. I protected myself. Max covered his face with his hands. Oh God. I turned to him. You wanted to know what it's like to deal with bills. You're about to find out. Lena tried to recover. You wouldn't. You're bluffing. I slid an envelope across the table. That's a copy of the statement your forged document generated. And the lawyer has the original. She grabbed the envelope and tore it open, hands trembling. The papers inside were marked with red stamps. Pending investigation. You did this, she hissed. No, I said. You did. I just stopped pretending not to see it. Max stepped forward, his voice breaking. Mom, please. We can fix this. We didn't mean to. Intent doesn't erase harm, I said. You taught me that when you lied about the wedding. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, I saw the child he used to be. But pity is a luxury I no longer afford. Lena grabbed her purse, knocking over a picture frame. It hit the floor, glass shattering across the tile. She didn't even flinch. You'll regret this, she said. No, I replied. You will. They left without another word. The sound of their car peeling away felt like the final note of a requiem. I knelt to pick up the frame. It was a photo of Max, maybe 6 years old, smiling through missing teeth. A tiny fingerprint smudged the glass. His. Mine. I traced it with my thumb until it disappeared. The room was quiet again, but the air had changed thicker, sharper, alive. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, shaking the windows. I looked toward the storm and whispered, "Let it come." Then I poured myself a drink not to numb the pain, but to toast the beginning of my own revolution. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt heavier, as if even the walls were holding their breath. I woke early, unable to shake the echo of Lena's last words. You'll regret this. Threats used to frighten me. Now, they only reminded me that fear was once their favorite leash. I brewed black coffee, poured it into my husband's old mug, the one with a small chip on the rim. I always kept it hidden in the back of the cupboard, like something sacred. Today, I set it right in the center of the table, a monument to endurance. The clock ticked. Outside, the sky was the color of unfinished business. I pulled the leather folder from the cabinet, the one that smelled of paper, time, and secrets. Inside were decades of memories. Mortgage contracts, old tax forms, love letters folded into bank statements, and beneath them all, the thin, yellowing envelope marked, "For Renate only if needed." My husband's handwriting. I opened it with both hands, careful not to tear it. Inside was a single document, stamped by Klein and Partners, and dated 17 years ago. It was an addendum to his will, one I'd completely forgotten. The clause read, "In the event that our descendants act in a manner unbecoming of the family's integrity, the entirety of the estate shall remain under the sole authority of Renate Klein, without contest or transfer." I stared at the words until they blurred. Unbecoming of the family's integrity. He had known. Somehow, he had known this day might come. I folded the paper neatly and slid it back into the envelope. Then, at the bottom of the folder, something else caught my eye. A flash drive taped inside the back cover. I peeled it free. A small label on it read, "Legacy, Hartman copy." When I inserted it into the old laptop, a folder appeared. Estate Recordings Legal Proof. Inside were scanned versions of every property title, every account, every signed, will all legally binding, and all under my name. A quiet laugh escaped my lips, the kind of laugh that trembles between disbelief and triumph. For years, I had felt powerless, reduced to generosity and guilt. But in this moment, I realized I had been holding the crown the entire time. Still, something in me hesitated. If I used these documents, it would be war. No more bridges left standing. No more illusions of family. I stood, walked to the window, and watched the street. Across the road, a black sedan was parked, tinted windows. Engine off. The same one I'd seen the night before. Lena's watchers. No doubt, waiting for a sign of weakness. I closed the curtains and sat back down. Weakness was over. I called Klein. Partners. When the receptionist answered, I said, "This is Renate Klein. I'm invoking Clause 17 of my late husband's estate. I'd like to secure full protection of assets immediately." There was a pause, then a soft, professional tone. "Yes, Mrs. Klein. Ms. Hartman anticipated your call. She'll arrive at your home within the hour." Exactly 50 minutes later, the doorbell rang. A woman in a gray suit stood there, sharp eyes, calm smile. "Mrs. Klein," she said, "you kept everything, didn't you?" I nodded and handed her the envelope. She scanned the document, nodded once, and said, "This clause gives you full authority. If they attempt further fraud, we can press criminal charges within 72 hours. Her voice was steady, the sound of order returning to chaos. "Do it," I said. She looked at me, measuring my resolve. "Are you sure? Once it's filed, there's no going back." I met her gaze. There was no family to go back to. She smiled faintly, almost respectfully. "I'll handle the paperwork personally," she said, slipping the envelope into her briefcase. Before she left, she paused at the door. "You're stronger than most clients I've met. I just had a longer training," I said. After she was gone, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. The house felt lighter. Even the ticking clock seemed to keep rhythm with my heartbeat. I poured another cup of coffee, opened my notebook, and wrote a new line beneath "Fraud confirmed." Assets protected. Legal shield activated. Then, out of habit, I looked out the window again. The black sedan was gone. But on the porch, someone had left an envelope. No name. Just my address scrawled in messy ink. I opened it. Inside was a single photo. To me at the bank 2 days ago. Handing Rebecca the cancellation slip. On the back, one line written in red marker. "You think you've won?" I didn't flinch. I simply slid the photo into the folder marked Evidence. Let them think they were playing a game. I was building a case. The next morning began with the smell of roses. That alone was suspicious. No one sends roses to a woman they've just betrayed unless they want something. I opened the door to find Lena standing there, bouquet in hand, smile rehearsed. The sky behind her was bright and false, the kind of morning that pretends to mean peace. She was dressed in soft beige, hair curled, her tone sugary enough to rot the air. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice carrying the confidence of someone sure she still owned the stage. "Of course," I said. "Come see what you tried to take." Her smile faltered for a second, then returned. She stepped inside, her heels clacking across my floor, every sound a trespass. She set the roses on the counter. "These are for you." I wanted to start over. I let her talk. She was always beautiful when she lied smooth, calm, cinematic. She reached into her purse and placed a folder on the table. "Just some small paperwork," she said. "Things the lawyer wanted clarified. Nothing big." "Your lawyer?" I asked. "Our lawyer," she corrected quickly. "You know, for the estate. It's all routine." Her voice trembled just enough to sound human. She sat across from me, folding her hands on the table like a child practicing confession. "I know things got ugly," she said. "We never meant to hurt you. Max. Just. He gets overwhelmed." I tilted my head. "And you? What do you get?" Her eyes flicked away. "Protective." There it was. The word she thought would justify everything. "Tea?" I asked, rising. She nodded gratefully, believing the ritual of warmth might soften the air. As I boiled the water, I reached behind the sugar jar and flicked on my small recorder again. A habit now. Its red light blinked faintly, pushing like a heartbeat. When I returned, I set her cup down first. She took a sip, sighed dramatically, and smiled. "You make the best tea," she said. "You said that the first time you came here." I replied. "The day you asked me for a loan." She blinked, smiled tighter. "I don't remember that." "I do," I said. "Mothers remember everything." She laughed softly, trying to change tempo. "Well, maybe today we can rewrite things." I smiled back, matching her tone. "Yes, Let's. I slid the folder toward me and opened it. Inside, a new draft of the power of attorney, transfer the same trap, just written neater. She'd even used a new font, as if changing the letters would cleanse the crime. Your lawyer's handwriting looks a lot like yours, I said. Her cheeks flushed. I typed it. Oh, I said, and forged the signatures for convenience. Her breath caught. Renate, please. You called me Mom once, I interrupted. Was that before or after you decided my worth was a balance sheet? She stared at me, panic flickering behind her eyes. Then she reached for the folder too fast. I closed it and placed my hand over it. The silence stretched between us like wire. Finally, she whispered, "You don't have to make this ugly." I smiled. I didn't. You did. I'm just documenting it. Her eyes darted to the recorder light she'd noticed. Her voice sharpened. You can't record me without permission. I can, I said. And I just did. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. You're insane. Careful, I said softly. Every word counts. I'll make sure the transcript reflects your tone. She froze, realizing the line she'd crossed, realizing it was recorded forever. Then she turned to leave. Take your roses, I said. They'll die before I forgive you. She didn't. The door slammed behind her, and the petals trembled in the vase like frightened hearts. I sat there for a moment, breathing. The house felt alive again, not with grief, but with clarity. Then I lifted the recorder, replayed the last few lines, and smiled. Perfect sound quality. Evidence number 3. By evening, I uploaded the file to my secure drive and sent it to Ms. Hartman with a simple subject line. Attempted coercion. Recorded. Within minutes, her reply came. Understood. Do not engage further. We'll act tomorrow. Tomorrow. That word sounded like a sunrise. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped the table, threw the dead roses into the trash. The stems snapped like bones. When I turned off the lights, the window reflected me calm, expressionless. New. In the reflection, something moved. Headlights flashing across the street. The same black sedan. But this time, it didn't stay parked. It rolled closer. I stepped back, out of sight. The engine idled for a moment, then drove away. No note this time. No photo. Just the message. We see you. I whispered to the dark. Good. Watch closely. Then I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote. They came smiling, left shaking. By the next afternoon, the storm had a name. Consequence. It came not with thunder, but with a letterhead Klein and Partners. Legal Enforcement Division. I watched the courier's car pull away from my driveway, the envelope still warm from his hands. Inside, 4 pages of precision, every line a blade. The document detailed Lena's forged papers, her unauthorized communication with the bank, and her recorded confession, filed officially. On our investigation, for the first time, it wasn't my word against theirs. It was ink against guilt. I sat back, the weight of justice, almost foreign. For years I had lived like a shadow in my own life, quiet, obedient, paying penance for other people's comfort. Now the system they'd tried to use against me was their cage. The phone began to ring around 3. I didn't answer. It rang again and again until the machine caught it. Max's voice cracked through the speaker. Mom, what did you do? They called from the bank. They're freezing our account. Lena's panicking. Please, just talk to me. I let the message finish, then pressed delete. The click felt cleaner than prayer. An hour later, I turned on the TV. The local news was covering a financial fraud case. Small headline, but familiar faces blurred in the background. I muted the sound and just watched the ticker scroll. Unauthorized signature case. Under review. I laughed softly. The sound startled even me. It wasn't joyful. It was liberated. Als dusk fell. I opened the window and let the cool air in. Outside, the street glowed with orange lamplight. The world continued, oblivious to the quiet collapse of 2 greedy hearts. Then headlights. A car slowed outside my gate. Max, He climbed out slowly, wearing the same coat he'd worn to the wedding I wasn't invited to. He looked older, smaller. I didn't open the door right away. When I did, the porch light hit his face pale, sleepless, fragile. "Mom," he said, "please, we need to talk." I stepped aside but didn't say, "Come in." He entered anyway, eyes darting around the room like a man searching for a lost version of home. The air between us was heavy with all the things he never said when it mattered. "I didn't know she was doing all that," he started. "She told me it was just for simplicity, that you approved it." "And you believed her?" I said. He nodded, ashamed. "You always do," I whispered. He looked up. "Despérate. They're saying we could lose the apartment. My job's gone. Lena's falling apart. Then maybe she'll understand how I felt the day you told me I wasn't special." Heavinced like I'd slapped him. "Mom, I didn't mean it. You didn't stop her from saying it. That's the same thing." He looked around, eyes landing on the chipped mug still on the table. "You kept it," he said softly. "I keep everything that survives," I replied. He sank into the chair, head in his hands. "I don't know what to do," he murmured. "You could start by apologizing," I said. "For what?" "For forgetting who raised you." The words hung between us, heavy and irreversible. When he finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes, but not the kind that heal, the kind that arrive too late. "Mom," he said, "they might arrest her." Isai hid. "Actions have consequences. She's pregnant," he blurted. The air went still. Even the clock seemed to stop. I stared at him. "Does she know?" "She found out last week." I closed my eyes for a moment, a wave of old tenderness breaking against my resolve. Then I said quietly, "Then she'll have to learn what kind of world she built for that child." He stood, broken, reaching for words that no longer worked. "Please, call them off. For the baby's sake." "I can't," I said. "Not anymore. I've already handed everything to the lawyer. It's not in my hands." He looked at me, like a man who'd just realized mercy had an expiration date. "Mom, you don't have to destroy us." I met his eyes. "You did that yourselves." He left without another word. The door closed softly this time. No anger, no storm, just defeat. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, listening to his footsteps fade down the path. Somewhere inside me, pity stirred, but I smothered it. Pity had built my prison. This was the cost of release. Later that night, I received an email from Ms. Ferry. "Hartman, investigation proceeding. All assets secured. Expect resolution within 48 hours." I replied with 2 words. "Thank you." Then I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of my own breathing. The house no longer felt empty. It felt earned. The kind of silence that follows the truth finally being spoken aloud. Rain came that night slow, cold, merciless. It fell against the windows like a memory that refused to leave. I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind, like someone whispering my name through regret. At 1 a.m., headlights swept across the living room wall. Then a knock, hesitant. Then harder. 3, 4, 5 times. I didn't need to ask who it was. When I opened the door, Max stood there, soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead. Behind him, the storm blurred everything except the look on his face, broken. "Despérate." Human again. "Mom," he said. "Please." His voice cracked on the single word, a sound halfway between confession and collapse. I stepped aside without a word. He came in, dripping water onto the floor, leaving small dark footprints that trailed his guilt. He looked smaller under the hallway light, like the boy who used to wake me at night after a nightmare. "I didn't know it would go this far," he said. "Fraud goes exactly as far as it's allowed." I answered. He winced, rubbing his face. "She's gone. Mom, Lena's gone." I stared. "Gone? Where?" She packed a bag. "Disappeared. The police came by the apartment tonight." His voice trembled. "They have a warrant." I felt no victory in it, only the dull ache of something inevitable. He sank into the armchair, shivering, hands pressed to his forehead. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the sound of rain hitting the roof. "Do you hate me?" he asked finally. I sat across from him, the chipped mug of coffee still on the table between us. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't recognize you." He looked up, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I tried to make her happy. She said you were controlling, that you never respected her. And you believed her?" "I wanted to believe someone," he whispered. "After Dad died, you disappeared into grief. I didn't know where to put mine." The words hung there heavy. "Honest? Late. Grief has perfect timing when it wants to ruin you." I looked at him, the man who had been my child. "I never left. Max," I said softly. "You just stopped looking back." He shook his head, sobbing now, all the arrogance washed away. "I ruined everything." "No," I said. "You just forgot who you were raised to be." He looked at me, trembling. "Can you forgive me?" "Forgiveness isn't a door you can knock on after the fire," I said. "It's the house that burned." His shoulders collapsed. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, quietly, I rose and fetched a towel, draped it over his shoulders, like I used to when he was sick. Old habits don't die. They haunt. He closed his eyes, whispering, "I didn't know she was pregnant." My chest tightened. "She told me. She said she was keeping it. Said it would fix things." "Isayed, babies don't fix things. Max, truth does." He nodded slowly, a broken rhythm of realization. Outside, thunder rolled again, but softer this time, like the sky was tired too. "Mom," he said after a while, "they might still charge her. What if she goes to prison? Then maybe she'll learn what taking without giving feels like. She'll lose the baby." I looked away. "Then maybe the world spares one more child from learning greed too young." He flinched at that, but didn't argue. Instead, he reached across the table, his fingers trembling. "I don't deserve your help," he said. "No," I replied, "but you're still my son." For a heartbeat, we were quiet, two survivors sitting in the ruins of what used to be a family. The rain slowed. The clock ticked on. I poured him coffee, the same chipped mug, now filled again. He wrapped his hands around it, breathing warmth for the first time in months. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "You don't," I said. "You start again. Without her. Without lies." He nodded slowly, eyes red but clearer. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Do you want me to come back tomorrow?" "No," I said. "You need to go live the truth first. Then come back." He nodded again and stepped into the fading rain. I watched until the darkness swallowed him. When I closed the door, I leaned against it, breathing out everything I'd held in for years. Tears came again, not from pain this time, but from release. I walked to the table, picked up the mug he'd left half full, and stared at the swirl of cooling coffee. Then, softly, I whispered, "Goodbye, my boy." Morning arrived, soft and pale, carrying with it a silence that didn't feel empty anymore. The storm had passed. The air smelled of clean soil and beginning gax. I packed my life into 3 boxes, not the things that mattered, only the things that still did. A photo of my husband, the chipped mug, my notebook of truths, and the letter from Klein and Partners confirming closure of the case. It was over. The estate was safe, the account secure, and the story that had swallowed me whole finally spat me out. By noon, I handed the house keys to the real estate agent. He asked if I was sure about selling. "I've been sure for years," I said. "I just didn't know it yet." The moving truck waited outside, humming like a heartbeat, ready to start again. I took one last look at the living room, the empty shelves, the faded patch on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. It was strange how grief leaves shapes in paint. Then I left. The town I moved to was small, quiet, near the river, the kind of place where people still wave from porches. The air tasted different here, lighter somehow. The cottage I bought had white shutters and a garden of untamed roses. I liked them that way, wild, unapologetic, alive. The first few days, I didn't unpack much. I painted instead. A canvas of colors that made no sense together. Gray, gold, red. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. It looked like survival. Neighbors stopped by a kind woman named Eleanor, who baked bread and asked nothing about my past, and an old man who fixed my mailbox without being asked. Their kindness was simple, not performative. It reminded me that not everyone gives to control. Every morning, I walked to the riverbank with a cup of coffee. The water moved slow, patient, like time forgiving itself. Some mornings, I would see young couples strolling by, laughing, holding hands. I didn't envy them. I just hoped they were kind to each other. One afternoon, I found an old sketch pad in the attic, blank pages, smelling faintly of dust and memory. I began to draw my husband's hands, the curve of Max's smile as a child, the outline of my old house fading into smoke. Each sketch felt like a confession written in silence. At night, I wrote in my notebook, the one that once tracked betrayal, now held peace instead. Page 37 read, "I stopped surviving when I started remembering I was alive." Sometimes, the guilt tried to crawl back, especially when the wind howled against the windows. I would see Max's face that night in the rain, his voice saying, "Can you forgive me?" And I would whisper to the dark, "I already did, just not the way you wanted." A week later, a small envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a check, $4,000, and a note in Max's handwriting. "For the years I didn't say thank you. For the years I took without asking. I'm working now. One day, I'll make it right." I pressed the note to my chest, closed my eyes, and let the tears fall warm, quiet, unashamed. I didn't cash the check. I pinned it inside my notebook, under the line that read, "Debt repaid to myself." That night, I sat by the window as the sunset painted the sky in gold. A soft breeze carried the smell of earth and something sweet forgiveness. Maybe, for the first time in years, I spoke aloud into the stillness. "Thank you, love, for teaching me to stand alone." And for once, the silence didn't echo, it answered. 2 months later, autumn began to whisper across the town, a slow wind carrying the scent of leaves and closure. The cottage had settled around me like a second skin. Every morning, the river shimmered brighter. Every night, the silence hummed softer. But peace, I was learning, isn't the absence of ghosts. It's learning to sit with them. One evening, I opened the old desk drawer and found a half-written letter. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink faint. It was addressed to Max, dated years ago, from a time when I still believed love could fix everything. "My dear boy, one day you'll understand the cost of silence. I don't blame you for leaving, but I hope you never learn how it feels to be left." I stopped reading. The rest was blank, unfinished, waiting for an ending. So I took a pen and began again. "Max, you once said I was dramatic. You were right. Love makes people dramatic. Pain does too. Maybe I became both at once, too loud to hear, too quiet to be heard. I don't know what kind of father you'll be, but I hope you'll listen when your child speaks softly. That's how all wounds start, when someone stops listening. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your debt another day. Be kind to yourself. And remember, the woman you called difficult was the one who stayed when everyone else walked away." I folded the letter neatly, sealed it, and placed it in the drawer beside my notebook. I didn't plan to send it. Some things are meant to be written, not delivered. Later that week, Eleanor knocked on my door. She brought pie, warm, cinnamon and apple. We ate by the window as the sun melted behind the trees. She told me about her late husband, about the ache that lingers but doesn't sting anymore. "Time doesn't heal," she said. "It teaches you where not to touch." I smiled. I've been learning that my whole life. After she left, I walked to the garden. The roses I'd planted were wild again, red and gold. Tangled, alive. I trimmed a few, arranged them in a vase, and placed them beside the sealed letter. Then I whispered, "For what's gone, and what stays?" That night, I dreamed of my husband. He stood by the river, wearing the same gray coat from the day we bought our first home. He didn't speak. He just smiled, nodded once, and pointed toward the sunrise. When I woke, I was crying, but not from sadness. From knowing he was proud. The next morning, a small package arrived. No sender, no return address, just my name, written in careful handwriting. Inside, a tiny silver rattle, wrapped in tissue paper. A note attached. It's a boy. His name is Daniel. I sat there for a long time, holding the rattle in both hands. It was cool to the touch, heavier than it looked. The name echoed through me like a prayer I didn't know I'd been waiting for. Daniel. I whispered it out loud. Then I smiled a quiet, trembling smile that tasted like forgiveness finally taking shape. I placed the rattle beside the roses and the letter, my 3 quiet relics of everything I'd lost and found. Winter came softly that year. The air smelled of frost and new beginnings, and the river no longer rushed it, whispered. I woke before dawn, wrapped in my wool shawl, and sat by the window with a candle and my notebook. The last page was still blank. It waited for me the way life waits, patient, forgiving. Outside, snow fell in quiet spirals. The world was finally gentle again. I had written everything worth remembering. The debts, the forgiveness, the ghosts that taught me how to stand. Now, I wanted to write only one thing, something that could survive me. I took a pen, the same one from years ago, and began. To whoever finds this, love is not alone. Kindness is not currency. And silence, if you let it, will turn you into a ghost before you die. Speak, even when it shakes your voice. Protect what's yours, not out of greed, but out of self-respect. And if they ever call you difficult, smile. It means they met someone they couldn't control. I closed the notebook, tied it with the same ribbon I used to wrap Max's gifts when he was little. Then I placed it in a wooden box with the chipped mug, the letter, and the small silver rattle. A family of memories broken, but whole in their own way. The cottage was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I brewed tea, the scent of chamomile filling the room, and walked outside. The snow crunched beneath my boots. By the riverbank, everything glittered under the early sun, clean, untouched. I knelt and buried the wooden box beneath the old oak tree. No grave, no tombstone, just a place for endings to rest. Goodbye, I whispered, and thank you. A soft wind moved through the trees, almost like an answer. For a moment, I felt everything: grief, love, loss, forgiveness merging into something simple. Peace. When I returned to the cottage, I made a small breakfast and turned on the radio. A familiar song played, the one my husband used to hum when he fixed the fence. I laughed quietly. You always know your cue. Later that morning, I walked to town. Eleanor waved from across the street, her scarf fluttering like a flag of normalcy. She handed me an envelope. It came for you, she said. From the city. Inside, a letter from Max. Mom, Daniel was born last week. He's small, loud, and perfect. We named him after Dad. I wanted you to know I'm working again. I'm doing it right this time. I don't expect forgiveness, just gratitude. For surviving me. If you ever want to meet him, you don't even have to call first. Just come. I read it 3 times. The ink had smudged in places, maybe from his tears, maybe from mine. I folded the letter, slipped it into my coat pocket, and walked to the river. The sky was a mirror, the snow untouched. I smiled. Some stories don't end, they just change hands. And this one, finally, belonged to the future. Renate stands at the riverbank, Daniel's tiny rattle hanging from her wrist by a ribbon. She looks into the water, calm, endless, forgiving. Hair voice, steady, warm. I thought the story ended with betrayal, but it ends here with peace.